Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about the nuclear-powered rat of Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. And of course, we are discussing Ikit and his pretty crazy campaign that can go in many different ways very quickly. Now, Ikit has a rather complicated starting situation, and in point of fact, I would dare say that this starting position compared to someone like Queek, even Skrulk, or someone like Snitch, and even Trench, this starting position really ruins the campaign to a certain extent. Because it can be fun playing it a couple of times, sure, but replayability is going to take a hit in this campaign because things can go sideways very quickly because of the randomness effect that you are going to be dealing with in this particular campaign. Now, Ikit is a really powerful legendary lord, undeniably so. He's got nuclear weapons that you can print over here with Doom rockets. He's got various upgrades for weapon teams that are actually fairly significant upgrades, and he does get other things as well that are pretty useful in the course of his campaign. Like he can get extra units in the Regiment Renown pool that other people may not have access to. He can get various upgrades for weapon teams that are pretty powerful. Even if you're not interested in using things like Warp-like Jezzails and Rattling Gunners, you'll still benefit from the Warp-Fire Throwers and the Warp Grinder benefits. Like Warp Grinder is getting 30 melee attack and 40% damage resistance is pretty damn substantial as a benefit, I'm not gonna lie, when you're looking at it. Or Warp-Fire Throwers getting 25 armor, fire resistance, and 10% missile strength. These benefits are significant. The Doomflayer, Doomwheel benefits are not necessarily quite as significant. In fact, they are very insignificant in comparison, but the power is certainly there. Here's the problem with this campaign. You do get research, you do get loyalty of new recruits, you get the lab, you get construction costs for engineering, and Ikit's situation is that he does have two items, one of which he starts with, and another one he unlocks in a relatively easy quest battle. He also gets a 50% upkeep benefit for Warp-like Jezzails, Rattling Guns, Warp-Fire Throwers. They may not necessarily want to build an entire army based on that. And he also gets a bunch of benefits that do fit that particular playstyle, including a loyalty benefit for Warlock Masters, and a recruit rank benefit for Warlock Engineers. Now, here is the issue in an Ikit campaign. First off, the army that you're supposed to be leading, the Rattling Gunner Jezzail army, maybe Warp Grinders and weapon teams in general, is not exactly the kind of army that would work against some of the opponents that Ikit does have. Specifically, if you consider the dwarves, and not even just the dwarves, but other forces as well. The issue here is that while Warp-like Jezzails and Rattling Gunners can work against certain types of armies, they will fail against others, especially in terrain. And also Rattling Gunners and Jezzails are useless in sieges, so something like Night Runners and Gutter Runners are going to be substantially better. Sure, you can get Rattling Gunners and Jezzails and all that in an army of Ikit, but you're really going to want, especially for siege battles, I emphasize that, you're going to want Gutter Runners. The Warp Grinder, Warp Fire Thrower, Jezzail, Rattling Gunner army is good in open field battles with the straight terrain. So if you're fighting Bretonnia, that's pretty good, because like the Warp Grinders will deal with cavalry, and Bretonnia has no other answer to you in those open field battles. But if you're dealing with the dwarves, if you're dealing with a faction like Belegar, then the problem then becomes is that Belegar's got ranged units that are going to be able to fire a lot more freely against you, and potentially outrange you as well. Sure, your Jezzails are generally going to outrange the vast majority of things, but your Rattling Gunners, given the terrain issues they have, yeah, it's not really a great thing. You're going to use things like Plague Claws, you can go with Combined Arms forces, but again, you're going to have certain limitations in this campaign because of that. And it's a complicated campaign because you start with RNS over here directly to the south of Sartos. No one really likes you as Skaven. You have Belegar, who absolutely despises you. Even if you do delay the inevitable war with Belegar, you will certainly end up in a war with him at one point, like I did over here. And then you've got Mogr to the west. He also hates you. The Fey Enchantress to the north, who you need to defeat for the sake of your short campaign victory condition. And by the way, that short campaign victory condition does require getting the lab to tier rank 3, which may not necessarily seem like a big idea, but it actually becomes a bit of an issue when you consider the fact, yeah, you know, Warlock Masters, not really that great, and just, yeah, leveling rank 15-1 is just not a fun situation. Honestly, especially like just the benefit like Graciers give you Envoy of the Console, which is pretty sweet, pretty powerful. Okay. Which will help you with confederations like Queek. Maybe if you go all the way to Lustria, which is not necessarily like Lustria is available to you as Ikit. The climate situation, you got a lot of climate suitability if you're playing a Skaven. So you could just go from Skavenblight all the way to Lustria. Skavenblight is such an incredibly defensible settlement. It's probably the most defensible settlement in the entire game. No one's easily marching on Skavenblight. Basically, it would take multiple stacks to breach the defenses and even overcome the Autoresolve benefit that the settlement would have. It is not happening without the significant fight over there. And once you get to an even higher rank in Helg, if you build a garrison building, yeah, no one is breaching Skavenblight. I'm stressing that point out. I think like it's easily one of the strongest settlements in the entire game. But the problem is, a campaign is not made by a settlement. I don't care how good one particular settlement is. And Skavenblight's economic potential is going to be unlimited because Skaven really benefit from having a lot of regions in a particular province for economic power. Skavenblight is a settlement in a single region province, and that's one of the limiting factors. Amazing settlement, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything otherwise. Really powerful landmarks, really useful things over here, like the Council Chamber 13. Incredible stuff over here. Undeniably so. That Lord Recruit rank, all that kind of stuff. But all the same, just not one settlement. And the problem is, like, you start a war with Testalia, so does Mogr. I think this campaign would be a lot better if there was a different, if there were two different Estalian factions. Like Mogr starts a war with one, you start a war with another. Because like right now, the best thing you can do in this campaign, you got various choices. You could just take Tobaro, then slowly make your way over here, but Mogr is going to beat you to Margarita. You can force march right about here and then try and take a fight to Margarita. The garrison army might attack you while on the forced march, so you're going to have to make that decision. But you could take the capital over here, and Tobaro is far enough that Mogur's not going to bother it, so it just might come down to Nuja. And you can delay a war with Mogr for long enough. That's what I did over here. Forced march here, the army that starts here moved over here to Nuja, and I took Margarita, dealt with them after that. Recruits and Skaven slaves, they dealt with them after that. Mogr just took Bibali. And after that, yeah, I moved against Arnessa. One of the strategies is you can just take the Borrow, abandon Skavenblight, use the food you have to get to tier 3 instantly. I'm not really fond of that because while I understand the value proposition of higher ranked units, I certainly do grasp the idea of having things like Poison Wind Mortars early on in a campaign. I do believe that the amount of money you would spend on that is just not worth it, and it's going to limit how many armies you're going to have. See, the key to a campaign is not building one single powerful army. In fact, your Legendary Lord alone brings so much power that your main army isn't necessarily the one you want to put the best units in. And also because it's on the front line, you're not even going to necessarily have the ability of building the best unit. So your best armies, the armies with the most powerful units should be the secondary armies. So you're rushing for tier 4 Skavenblight, tier 5 Skavenblight. I don't think that's necessarily a good decision in a campaign. But the problem in this campaign is since everyone hates you and you're exposed on all sides, and everywhere you expand, you're going to encounter enemies, you are going to have to make some rough decisions. Like over here, I could have used Andre to support this particular army against Belagar. Okay, fair enough, but Belagar mainly has a melee army, and I have enough firepower over here that I think I can overcome him. So it's not necessarily a concern right there, but it is these kind of decisions because everywhere you go. And on top of that, since everyone hates you, you're going to have very limited economic partners in the campaign. The one thing that you can make work in this campaign is Ally Grom. The reason allying Grom is such a really powerful thing is he's swimming in money. The bastard is literally printing money, and so he will have a ton of money to actually give you. And that is one of the things you can actually use during the course of this particular campaign. Take advantage of the money that you can get from Grom as one of the genuine campaign strategies that is usable over here if you are playing Ikit. In particular, the problem that because otherwise you just won't have the money. There's a lot of settlements over here that are too exposed to build up properly early on, so you're gonna be in an economic deficiency compared to other Skaven. Because one of the reasons I rate Snitch so highly is he has a province that you can take with his starting army. It might not necessarily be the easiest fight with starting army, but you can deal with the Savage Orcs with his starting army. Although it should be pointed that Night Runners and Gut Runners are not great against units that outrun them. Savage Orcs can certainly do so, but he does have some really powerful units there. And the thing about that is the economic potential you get from a 4-region province is significant for the Skaven. Whereas Ikit has to fight tooth and nail, or tooth and claw, if you will, for the sake of 3-region provinces. Now, obviously, there's good amount of economic potential in these provinces as well. There's food in Tylea, which is really, really important for a Skaven, because generating this much food, well, you can get to max food in this campaign even as you're taking settlements left and right at tier 3, maybe even tier 4 if we're talking about provincial capitals. So that does give you certain advantages to work with, but there's also so many limitations. And if you go against Belegar, let's say you pick a fight with Belegar early on, he might be able to defeat you, you might be able to defeat him, you do have a nuclear weapon, that does bring with it significant advantages, but if you go further north to finish Belegar, you're going to run into Gelt. What I did over here is play the Skaven campaign as a Skaven. Scrag had expanded to Western provinces. I fought a war with Ikit armies there and sold the territory to Belegar. That bought me time because I got the non-aggression pact. I was able to basically bribe Belegar into a peace for a while. It will never be a permanent peace. He hates you so much in this campaign. The reason he hates you is not even just the aversion he feels towards you, although that is certainly a significant factor because you don't have that -100 aversion. But the reason he hates you is that he's actually friendly with a lot of the factions, like Carcassonne, the Border Princes, Tylea, that you may fight. He's actually quite friendly with that. You can wait, of course, for Tylea to be wiped out to Pyronessa and Border Princes to be wiped out by Scrag. But again, Belegar is not going to like you, regardless of what you do. So at best, you can delay a war. I mean, if you constantly feed them territory every turn, sure, but that would require you to build territory. And besides, Belegar is not going to give you a significant amount of money, so you're actually going to be on the losing side of things if you do so. You can delay it. Hell, you could even decide, you know what, I'm not going to bother with Tylea. You just go for Margarita and Estalia and then hop on over here. Like this situation in the south of your southern territory is what you want to aim for. But the problem is, let me put it like this. There's Dwarves, there's Archon, and there's Rapans here. Dealing with them, like in this case, I dealt with them in this particular army, but they had basically wiped each other out. But if you rush Rapans, she will throw multiple stacks against you. I was lucky enough to not have to deal with that. And basically, like, just dealt with, like, 2 stacks at most, and at different times. Like, 1 from Rapans, 1 from Archon, and the garrisons, of course. And that's the kind of situation, like, you really have to be clever in this campaign, because if you're not, I would recommend just waiting a bit, waiting for the declaration of war. Also, very crucial, try and minimize the losses you take in every battle. This is the kind of campaign where you want to fight every battle manually, unless you're using Autoresolve mods, but even then, you gotta be really careful, because even with those mods, and if you take too many casualties in battles, and this is the important thing, and the reason like a Night Runner army works really well against a lot of opponents. I'd say a Giselle Rattling Gunner army can work very well if there's some fast movers, like you corner camp with that in a good position, or you get to a good position on battlefield and annihilate them before they reach you. Usually speaking, a Night Runner army works best for a Skaven because you can outrun the vast majority of enemies on the field and do a significant amount of damage to them. Or a combined arms army, like I got over here with heroes, all that, can end up working very well. One of the advices I would give you is, like, regardless of what you do, when you take a tier 3 capital, like, it can be, like, what I did here is, like, I used the initial food I had to get Margarita as a tier 3 settlement. I built both a tier 2 barracks and a hidden lair. And because of that, I was able to get chieftains and assassins fairly quickly. And Skaven actually have a huge amount of hero potential in this campaign, and you want to use it. Because the units without heroes are just not really going to work all well, and you gotta decide what are you interested in. I would say some work grinders are really powerful for the sake of sieges, and you can get a really high armor army that can help you out resolve a lot of battles, but it's going to be vulnerable to mass range units. It's going to be vulnerable to, like, an army like Belegar is not necessarily the one he has here, but in general, dwarves could counter it. Hell, I'm not sure this particular army could defeat Belegar. That's going to be an interesting discussion. Well, I mean, I do have one nuke, so I can always use that. Maybe even get the second one just to be on the safe side for another battle. How you use your nuclear weapons is going to be important, because which battles you decide to use it for. Like, I would say Belegar is the biggest threat. Wood Elves are pretty powerful, though. If you can get Wood Elves in certain maps where reinforcements, for instance, are coming from a very narrow choke point, you can just drop a Doom Rocket on their entire fucking army and obliterate it in a single go. That's how I defeated Orion, for instance. One particular campaign, it's like, oh, he just came in with all his troops. It's just like, drop a nuke on his ass. Like, especially in Alpha Lauren itself, there's quite a few of those maps, so just bear that particular aspect in mind. But you do have problems dealing with Wood Elves because they flat out outrange you regardless of what you're doing, and they can do an enormous amount of damage. You could throw multiple stacks at the problem, like maybe have a Skaven slave army following your main army around, just use those for the sake of taking casualties, be a real Skaven legendary lord. That's how they do play in the lore, so to speak. But if you're having to recruit an army just to follow your main one around because your main one is not good enough to deal with fights, then that diminishes your potential, because you're still going to have supply lines to deal with, and that is going to diminish you. Like over here in this campaign, I am running bankrupt. Granted, I am maintaining quite a few armies, and it's turn 38, but like I've shown campaigns on this channel, even as Skaven, where by turn 38 I'm painting a map. This campaign as Ikit is just a slower campaign. It doesn't matter the quality of the units you get from Skavenblight, it's the terrain itself and the decisions the terrain forces you to make, the diplomatic decisions, etc. Also, the fact that there's a bunch of terrain like the Lauren terrain, you can't ignore Lauren. You do that, you're going to end up at war with all of it. And believe me, like, Durfu is not necessarily the kind of guy you want to ignore. Though in this case, I'm pacifying him because I took all of it. Like, I actually conquered Lauren in this situation. I'm keeping the Oak of Ages, but I've sold some 2 regions to Durfu over here. And it's like, well, he's not doing anything with them, but he gave me a decent amount of money for him. Yeah, battle with Belegar right there. And you gotta make these decisions. You gotta decide where you're gonna expand, like how many armies can you throw in the south. It's generally speaking very worth it to expand over here. Not the least of which, 1, the terrain is suitable. 2, if you get, like, the problem with Rapance is getting the landing done. If you get the landing, if you get entrenched, if you take Kafir, or if you take Al-Haik, or you can jump at Zandri and take that settlement, deal with that, and then march on Rapance. If you can do that and establish a foothold, you're in a great position. But one of the main reasons, of course, you want to go over here in Khemri is obviously the Vault of Nagash. It's pretty damn powerful, especially as Skaven, considering the sheer amount of heroes that you can build in a campaign like this. Personal advice, you can either sack to borrow, wait for Aranesta to be very close towards taking the Tylian capital, then you jump her. You basically join a war, the Tylian Sartosa war. You join that, you let the garrison over here, ideally when she's besieging it, you join it, you let the garrison do most of the fighting. Like, Aranessa wins the Autoresolve, but she'd actually lose the manual battle. So that's kind of one of the things. And then drop a nuke on defenders, take over the settlement, march on Sartosa, take over all of it. Try and pacify Belegar as much as you possibly can. Like, one of the things you can do at the very beginning of the campaign is declare war on his enemies and get a non-aggression pact. That will buy you time. It's just like if you give a money faction every turn, if you get a non-aggression pact, they will not instantly declare war on you. Those are some of the keys to this particular campaign that you have to be aware of if you're going to play it. And that's kind of the problem, though, that I see with it. Like, the moment you've overcome these challenges, you've won the campaign. I suppose that's kind of the problem. Like, imagine once I take these armies and I can abandon this particular bloody position, and, you know, once Grom is in a decent enough situation over here, and I abandon this situation because, you know, I've weakened this area so much, like, there's nothing that's going to stop 5 armies with Rattling Gunners, Gutter Runners, and Jezzails in them. Very, very damn few once you get to that position. But it's getting to that position that's really the tricky affair of this campaign. Cosine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.